Hello there. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I'm so grateful that you are here. Welcome to this new moon forecast. We're going to look at the main astrological themes, energetic themes, see if we can glean a little bit of wisdom and some insight from this temporal map that we call astrology of the next 2 weeks, plus a couple days, right? So today's the 14th of April, 2026. Our new moon in Aries will be exact according to according to all astrology, on the 17th of April, 2026. And we're going to look at the main themes moving through the 2 weeks to May 1st, which will be the Scorpio full moon. I will be completely honest with you. I am not actually prepared. I mean, I am prepared in terms of my notes and going through the left brain type of preparation for this forecast. Of course, I'm just not in the mental headspace necessarily prepared, but this is the best time right now. It's really the only time that I have before the new moon to record this, so we're just gonna go for it. I actually have been wanting to check in and do a vibe check out on the public platforms because it has been quite trying since the Libra full moon. I mean, we were really tasked with even though we may have been identified with, and in some cases, maybe even sustained by the frustration of something that we have maybe trying to push that wasn't quite ready to come to fruition or to be fully potentiated, to maintain a sense of imagination and playfulness and almost innocence emotionally and within ourselves, as the reality of that situation really presented itself. So we started with a new moon in Pisces at March, blah, 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 right before the equinox. For an astrologer, like dates are just out, dates are out the years, all of that stuff is not really my expertise. I am a Sag through and through. It is all abstraction, storytelling, mythology, and the transference of those things through a medium such as this, right? So, forgive me if I don't have like the details nailed down, but I do know that the last new moon was pre-equinox because it was the very last degrees of Pisces. So we had a new moon in Pisces, we had this full moon in Libra, and now we're in our balsamic moon phase, and things are really starting to wrap up on a number of levels. So some big things to look forward to in the next 2 weeks. Whoo boy, so the Aries energy, as we're going to look at the chart, is really strong. Mars is now in Aries. Mercury is moving into Aries as of today. It's moving through the last degree of Pisces, and I think that a lot of the mental fog has lifted and is in the process of lifting with this particular transit, this ingress into Aries. Even with Mercury coming out of the retrograde shadow, it still has just been this fogginess and confusion and delusion and maybe just kind of escapist fantasy land here with Mercury and Pisces. But as this transition is in the process of happening, of Mercury coming into Aries, I feel like things are getting more streamlined, which is, perfect for an Aries energy. It's cardinal fire, right? It's very directed action. So with Mercury coming into this space as of today, I can feel, at least for me personally, and I'm going to share a couple stories to maybe validate some things that you might have been feeling over the last month and certainly the last 2 weeks with the Libra full moon, because we had been and are continuing to be tasked with the responsibility of a conscious, self-aware being to maintain within ourselves emotionally, subconsciously, our internal landscape, the living soul that the moon represents in astrology. We've been really tasked with maintaining a sense of imaginative play, a sense of innocence, a willingness to dream, and to not lose that part of ourselves, even as the more outward type of expressive nature of the sun in Aries, which, by the way, the sun is very much exalted in Aries. And so those themes of self-initiation and our desires and wanting to potentiate those desires in Aries is we become very identified with them when the sun is in Aries. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. But the degree of the full moon, as we talked about in the last forecast, really set up this frustration of something that we want to change, that we want to enact, that we want to act upon, that isn't quite done forming yet. And there's some frustration that goes along with that. And the full moon was a real challenge for us to, realize that it's all, whatever it is, there's just been profound disappointment. There has been a lot of mental health struggle, I've noticed. I'm going to share a particular experience with an energy work client that just happened that really drove it home for me. I myself have been really working through my own mental health crash out, if you want to call it that. It's been a long time since I've really felt kind of consumed. And again, I think that is the Mercury and Pisces energy. It can be really difficult to separate yourself and your own mind and your own consciousness from, the weight and the full experience of the collective unconscious. And there's a lot of it going around from various different vectors, various different angles for all kinds of reasons. And so if you have been struggling, if you've been feeling frustrated, if the intrusive thoughts have been a little bit more intrusive lately, it's not just you. I mean, we all are responsible for ourselves in that situation, whatever's going on, but it is certainly not isolated. And I am personally still working through this, regardless of where the experiences are coming from, because I'm still kind of on the fence about, the influence, the artificial influence into our mental space, right? Into our emotional body that can be very easily impacted and influenced by certain types of technologies. I mean, it's just even an algorithm on social media is enough to send you into a tailspin. But there are more sophisticated ways, I feel like, to really push people's buttons in terms of their mental and emotional health. And I mean, not the least of which is just the solar weather in general. That has really calmed down for now. Let's see, it's expected, especially the solar flaring is really expected to start upticking. There's another big coronal hole that is coming into view. So, there's lots of different things that can impact the way that we feel, the mental state that is the filter for everything else that we do and that we, act upon. But I do feel like that Mercury coming into Aries, that things are a little bit more pointed now. Like I said, it's more streamlined. Our thoughts are more streamlined. We're starting to get a sense here of where we want to direct that mental energy towards something that we do truly desire. It's just that since the full moon in particular, and this whole lunar cycle really has been an opportunity to really assess the nature of what those desires are. And just because they aren't fulfilled in the way that we may have initially conceptualized what we wanted doesn't mean that it's not coming from a deeper soul-oriented journey, if that makes sense, right? And nothing succeeds like failure. Nothing fails like success, right? And this is actually a big part of this upcoming new moon energy, and the fact that Chiron is very much a part of it. So, I mean, of course, the healing, and not even the healing, but just the transparency of those wounds with the sun and Chiron together, right? Just highlighting them, exposing them to some sort of sunlight, if you even want to think about it that way. But it's also initiating a cycle over the weeks ahead of of being honest with ourselves and what it takes to really initiate and personally act on true spiritual independence. And that can be really difficult for all kinds of reasons. And the Chiron aspect is going to be a big part of healing those wounds and stepping more into not just the healing aspect, which is an ongoing process, but what we can learn from it and how we can assist and guide other people maybe through that process. So we'll look at all the astrology, we'll break it down as we usually do. And the big things this next 2 weeks, I would say, is the big one is Uranus is going to come into Gemini before we even get to the full moon. Okay. So Venus in Taurus is going to conjunct Uranus at 30 degrees Taurus. This is a big deal too. This is the last conjunction of these two planetary bodies in the sign of Taurus for the next 84 years, right? Which is an entire Uranus transit. So, and at the last degree of Taurus, the home territory of the planet of Venus, this is going to carry a lot of weight and represent the ending of cycles and the beginning of new ones. And I know that just gets so played out, and I think at times we just get so tired of hearing that same thing of just like, we gotta release what is gone and accept what is coming, let go of the old and open up to the new. But that is a big part of what's going on here. And that's part of this eclipse cycle that we're in right now, which is that we've already let go of where we've been. We've already transmuted. We've already transformed at a soul level. Now it's just like bubbling up to the surface into real life. And each month now is an opportunity to work with a different aspect of ourselves as we go through this process. And the fact that the new moon is going to be conjunct Chiron. It is in a connection to the Andromeda galaxy, so there's a huge galactic astrology component to this new moon. The fact that Venus and Uranus will be conjunct at the Pleiades. I mean, there's a lot of overlay there that is substantial. So before I get too far into the astrology, I just want to share an experience that I had with an energy work client that I had somewhat recently. And hopefully this will give some perspective or some insight if you yourself have been struggling with things, if your mental health has really been shaky, if you've been having intrusive thoughts, if you're just emotionally, feeling just drained, right? That drained, it's beyond tired, like tired at a soul level. And of course, there is a lot happening at the geopolitical and international level that is enough to do that if you find yourself like linked into that. You know what I mean? If you continue to gather your sense of security or peace of mind from what's happening outside of you, then of course you're going to feel that way. Even those of us who are cultivating peace through our daily practices as our lifestyle at this point, there's only so much you can do to, push out the collective unconscious. And it's been pretty substantial. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend, and I never do, that I'm somehow outside of that or above that, or I've transcended that, because I'm still a human being just like everybody else. Assumingly, watch everybody that's watching this channel. Except for the bots, because they're not humans. But I'm not talking to them because they don't have to worry about spiritual development, right? So if you've been feeling these things, it's okay. And it's in this contention, it's in this friction, it's in the doubt that we actually secure our peace of mind, that we secure or strengthen our connection to spirit, whatever that means to you. And you don't want to feed the beast, so to speak, but you also don't want to get caught up in your toxic positivity and just be like, everything's fine, there's nothing wrong at all, because we all know where that goes, right? So the experience, and I'm not entirely convinced that there hasn't been a little button pushing technologically to aggravate this, right? But that doesn't necessarily, I don't know, right? I don't know, because even if that's the case, that's something that you can use as well as part of your spiritual development, right? You're like, oh man, I'm really getting my button pushed in this way or that way. This is a great opportunity for me to up my game, so to speak. Like last night, I have this huge piece of pyrite. And if you don't know what pyrite is, it's fool's gold, but it also is a really good it's a really good mineral to kind of dispel negativity. It's very protective. And I was just like, I just can't, maybe I should just like literally place this by my head when I sleep. And lo and behold, I woke up today for the first time in many days, if not longer, maybe like weeks, where I was just like, wow, I don't feel like I am exhausted in my soul. And that also says to me that there is a lot of loosh gathering and generating right now. So, and if you don't know what loosh is, believe me, the internet will tell you, and you can go find that out for yourself. And it's spelled exactly how it sounds, loosh. So, I saw a client, a brick and mortar client for energy work, which is always a pleasure. And this was just a couple of days ago at the beginning of the weekend. And this person shared with me that they were having a really hard time and having a lot of intrusive thoughts, and like getting to the point where they were starting to feel very depressed and very worried about themselves, actually. So they took their own steps to mitigate that in order to get themselves more balanced out, but they did share it with me. And in fact, the night before that session, I dreamt about that person and all of their energy, and I was just like, whoa, I haven't even woke up yet, and this person's energy is really influencing my astral state. And I think that's, just because they were ready for their energy works, their Reiki session, and we're really looking forward to it. So, now I don't do this often. When you practice Reiki, you truly are just a conduit, and it's very relational. You are acting as a tuning fork that is resonating, and your client or the person who is receiving it is then in a position to start resonating at that frequency, just like a tuning fork would, right? And so, but in the process of that, I as the practitioner and the conduit, get a lot of information, as many of my energy work clients already know. If you've gotten any energy work from me, distance or otherwise, you know that a lot of information comes in while this is happening. So one of the things that came through, I spent a lot of time, obviously, in this person's upper body, like the upper chakras, because that's where they really needed it, and that's what they were talking about, the intrusive thoughts, the self-deprecating monologue going through their head, right? Like the borderline suicidal ideation, that type of stuff, and being really concerned for the mental health, their own mental health. So one of the things that came through, besides the fact that I was like really guided to just stay in this area for a long time, I started to get this image and this impression of this I can't even, it was an object. It was a black object that was literally intrusive, like it was embedded into their brain. And I was like, this is the culprit here, wherever this came from. And maybe it's been dormant for a while. It seemed pretty embedded, but for whatever reason, it was on and it was receiving a signal, right? Who knows where that signal was coming from? And I was like, wow. And like I said, I don't often do shamanic work in the context of Reiki, but sometimes I do, because it's just like, yeah, you should totally extract this right now. And so I did, right? And it took a little bit, but I did extract it. And then, the person's upper chakras just filled with this beautiful, like orange creamsicle light. It was really cool. And, things definitely changed for them. And, I'm going to be able to follow up with them very soon and see how, the days after had went. But it was literally intrusive. So it was like that was receiving some sort of signal that then was getting perpetuated, right? And so once that was extracted, that person had the opportunity to kind of come back into themselves. Now, it's going to be very difficult to be like, yes, that was the thing that really made the difference, because they've taken other steps in order to mitigate their mental health symptoms. So there's no way to really know. I mean, they're going to have to trust themselves on that one. But that's just an example of something etheric but very real that was influencing this person who normally doesn't have this issue, or maybe it's been a really long time since they've had that issue. And I feel like that it sounded so similar to what I was experiencing and had been, that I was just like, I bet lots of other people are going through some measure of this, right? Especially since the full moon. It was really, it was a very, how do I say, I feel like that what we were being asked and tasked with is something kind of advanced, right? How do you maintain that imaginative play, that dreamer perspective? How do you not lose faith in who it is that you are working towards being when, how you've identified what that's going to look like or how you're going to act on that just kind of gets cut off at the pass, or something changes about that, right? So I feel like that many of us have been going through that over the past 2 weeks almost. And so now we're coming into this new moon period where we're going to have the opportunity over the next month, right, to really address those wounds of self, basically. If we're going to talk about Aries, and we got all this Aries energy, Mars is there. And I think that's made it a little difficult because there's this instinctual part of us that's been like, okay, it's time to go. Like, I'm ready to act. And I know I was definitely feeling that. The connection with Saturn, as we're going to see, is probably going to be a little bit of slow your roll, not even slow your roll, but just listen, there are limitations that have to be dealt with. It might feel like you hit a brick wall. It might be even more frustrating. We'll see. But it also is going to be listen, you have to have all your ducks in a row and have this infrastructure in place in order to act on it in a way that is going to last. Because that's the thing about Saturn. It lasts. It has stamina. It has a structure. It has a foundation. It is something that is, situated. It's like putting that rebar in. If you've ever been to Burning Man, right? You put that rebar in the ground multiple feet before you tie up your structure or your tent, because otherwise it's going to go, right? And so you have an entire structure like that with Saturn. So, but I do feel like Mercury coming into Aries today is the first real step. It's out of shadow now, but now it's coming into a much more, like I said, direct, singular mental focus of okay, it's go time. This is where we're going. So let's actually start looking at the chart itself. Okay. Now that my monologue is finished. Alrighty, let's make sure this is formatted correctly. It sure is. All right, let me do some work here. There we go. All right, so I do have the chart for the new moon. As you can see, there's not a ton going on in terms of, all the lines, right? Because these are the aspects. But the thing that really sticks out to me about this, before I start getting into all the Sabian symbol language and really unpacking all of the specifics about the new moon itself, is if you notice here, it's in a quincunx, or an in conjunct with Black Moon Lilith, that is in late Scorpio. This is our Heyoka, or our sacred clown type of energy here. Or you can think about it as getting close to Alpha Centauri. I need to make a quick caveat, and for those of you who've been with me for a long time, just bear with me, because you already know all of this, and that's probably why you're still, consistently subscribing to membership or this channel, is because this speaks to you. When I talk about star seeds and galactic degrees, and I've asserted this from the beginning, anybody who's had a star seed reading or the package with me knows that this has always been the case. You do not have to subscribe to the reality or the belief system that being a starseed means that your soul has come from another star system, right? You can, If that's what speaks to you, that's fine, but you don't need to in order for galactic astrology to have a profound impact on you as part of the multidimensional temporal map. The idea here is that if you want to get more into the theosophical slash anthroposophical, right? The mystery schools, or even esoteric Christianity, all of the planetary bodies, all of the luminaries, and I would go so far as to say the star systems within the galaxy, they're all living beings. They all have a frequency that emanates off of them. And depending on where they are in relation to everything else and the angles they make geometrically, they're going to have an impact on the soul of the person who is the center of the reading, right? So I periodically like to put that out there to make sure that I put that crowbar separation between me and a whole slew of pop clickbait stuff about this topic, because it is more for entertainment purposes and clicks than it is about genuine spiritual development. So anyway, there's my, my 2 cents about that and how I read starseed and galactic astrology and how it actually, works for the person I'm reading for, right? The client. So anyway, let's get back to the astrology. So the quincunx, the inconjunct, right? The 150 degree angle that this green line represents is something that doesn't fit. It's the square peg in the round hole. It requires the individual, in this case all of us who are using this temporal map, to find that balance within ourselves, because if you try to find it outside of yourself in this aspect, it's not going to work and you feel very discombobulated. Now, when we're talking about 27 to 28 degrees Aries, which is where the new moon itself is a large audience confronts the performer who disappointed its expectations. Well, who's the performer? Well, it's us as individuals, right? We are the performer. And sometimes we have to take responsibility for our performance or how we've acted and be prepared for that, right? There's a maturity and a sense of responsibility with that. But it also is, if you have, maybe there isn't an expectation that you've set. Maybe the expectation is from those who are quote unquote the audience, right? And perhaps the audience has a expectation of you, the performer, and when you step out into true spiritual independence, whatever that means to you, sometimes that audience, whoever that is, that could be family, that could be your work environment, that could be just kind of your social friend group. And we've seen this. This is not new. This is not new at all. This is 2020, right? You step out of line and you have to face the consequences of the audience. A large audience is very specific about the language. Sorry, I have something is kind of getting on my nose and in my sinuses. So complete spiritual independence. That's where this new moon is, right? A large audience confronts the performer who disappointed its expectations. Well, chances are when you come into complete spiritual independence, those who have come to rely on the person you were or have expectations that are unrealistic or are based on their own stuff are going to be disappointed. And so how we address this is going to be a big part of this whole lunar cycle that we're going into. And then you have CHIRON that is in the process as well. And really this new moon not only highlighting this, right? Drawing, just shining a light on it, which can be really difficult. But also this is how we heal. When we know exactly what we're dealing with, then we know exactly how to respond to it. And through imagination, a lost opportunity is regained. There's something reformulating here with this new moon. Now, the downside of this, and this is where people will kind of go back into their woundedness, is a pity as a self-retreat from reality, right? Things didn't work out the way that you wanted. There is profound disappointment. There's, whatever it is that you are experiencing, there is a negative, the negative side of this to reinforce the woundedness, right? The victim role is to just basically pity yourself because you can't deal with the reality. This new moon is going to be one of those separation points for people. Do you either step into responsibility for yourself, complete spiritual independence, knowing who you are, realizing that might piss some people off or disappoint some people in your life as you are walking that path for yourself, or are you going to feel sorry for yourself and just keep being a victim? I mean, it's really up to each of us individually, but this new moon is going to be, that's the theme of the month ahead, okay? So there are plenty of opportunities to bridge the gap, so to speak, that we're going to see. But for the most part, what this new moon really represents is, are we going to are we going to see those wounds clearly and be honest with ourselves and really work through our trauma, whatever it is, and not lose faith in what it is that we are moving towards, even though it might have been misguided. Perhaps we misread some things, or maybe that's just not what our soul actually is here for, because it's so much more materialistic in terms of what do I desire. The quincunx to Lilith over here in Scorpio is I think I get the sense here that it will be very easy to bypass the necessity to really step out into that spiritual independence by kind of defaulting back to, well, I'm just the family black sheep. I'm just the Heyoka. I'm the empath. Oh my God. And speaking as a person who does all of those things, right, is the empath and tends to fall into the savior role for people until you stop doing that, and then you are the pariah, right? Like, you can't get away from it. It's really easy to go to kind of default back into that place, if that makes sense, right? To just be like, well, this is just how it is. I'm always going to be the empath. I'm always going to be the Heyoka or the sacred clown. And it's not to say that those things can't be resolved with stepping into your spiritual autonomy and sovereignty, right? If we're going to talk about Aries. And of course, there's so much Aries here. But there is a deep kind of primal sense here that, where is your allegiance really? You don't want to lose sight of your connection and the power that is generated with your relationship to spirit, whatever that means to you, right? If you are a Christian, then, that is through Christ. If you, whatever your spiritual, because if you don't have a spiritual focus and you're watching this, then that's also just entertainment for you, right? This is just, looking for someone else to give you the answers so that you can feel better about what's going on. So let's just assume that if you are watching this, it's because you do have a spiritual trajectory. And this quincunx is going to be really interesting because it's not just going to be a one-off. It is going to be the discomfort that is going to come throughout the entire lunar cycle, right? And keep in mind that the full moon on May 1st will be a Scorpio full moon. So there's something very deep, very powerful, very feeling oriented that we're going to be working with that has to do with power dynamics. It has to do with our own subconscious. It has to do with our shadow, right? And I do feel like that's part of this too, is like you can't forget about your own shadow. Your work is to integrate your shadow as opposed to push it away or to deny its existence or to just like give yourself over to it entirely. I feel like that conversation and that experience is going to be something that comes up, throughout the weeks ahead with this whole new moon. So, all right. So I just needed to check my schedule at work and just make sure that I'm not getting called in earlier than I need to. And so far, so good. So let's start moving through the weeks beyond this. This is going to be a powerful new moon. And you remember, I do remember when I was doing the fire horse readings, I'd be like, April, we're going to kind of get a respite here. And I was just like, wow, I was totally wrong. And it's not really. It's not really a respite. It's a respite from like the insanity that May, June, and July, August is, especially July into August is going to be. It's a respite from that, but what's happening is so much more of our own personal integration of everything that has happened since February, since the beginning of this new year, and since this eclipse cycle. So everything is direct right now. And Uranus is going to come into Gemini. That's going to be a big transition. It's going to be a very big transition, actually. And I'm very curious to see. Many people that I've done fire horse readings for have very prominent positions at that 0 to 3 degrees Gemini. So they're about to go through it wherever that is for them. And so it's just going to have an impact. I suspect it's going to be something to do with the financial segment of things, just because it's a transition out of Taurus into Gemini, but we shall see, right? So moving ahead here from this new moon in Aries, I mean, there are a lot of like transits that are happening because Mercury is going to sextile Pluto. It's going to meet Mars, as we can see. So let's kind of go through this and see where things are really lining up. So you can see now, before we even get to this new moon, you're going to see that Mercury and Neptune have already come into their conjunction. And normally this is one of those like, potentially either spiritually uplifting and like kind of like a spiritual breakthrough type of moment, or you just, again, the fog just coming through and you're just steeped in delusion. I think the Aries energy is what makes this conjunction a little less like nebulous, if that makes sense. It certainly could be very confusing and people could find themselves really aligned with and identified with something that they really don't know what it is that they're actually aligned or identified with. That could certainly be the case, but let's just give ourselves the benefit of the doubt that everything since the mid-February has led us to the point where we're like, nope, okay, I know where I want to be aligned with and see myself within. So that conjunction, I think, is really going to just bring that kind of spiritual enhancement to that situation. But as we go through from the new moon, you're going to see that Mercury and Mars will be conjunct. Mars and Saturn will be conjunct. Mercury is going, as you can see here, Mercury is coming into a sextile with Pluto. I will say that this is the degree that Pluto is going to station retrograde at, and that's going to be something that happens in May. So the retrograde season will start not too long from now. But Mercury sextile Pluto fuels very direct and powerful communication because Mercury is in Aries, and it transforms ideas into action, and with the Pluto aspect especially, it encourages uncovering hidden truths, making strategic, unconventional decisions, and embracing progressive mindset, forward thinking, that kind of stuff. So I think that there'll be a lot, not only making those strategic decisions, but I think uncovering the hidden truths, like really starting to see things for what they are and have been, right? I think Pluto, the position of Pluto has been very difficult for all of us, I think. I think it's one thing to be like, yeah, transpersonal action. It's another thing to actually like walk through that, and Pluto is the final word, right, of power, raw, transformative power. That's not about the ego or what our subjective desires necessarily are, other than my subjective desire as a person is to put this mask on and act out this transpersonal responsibility, right? I think this Mercury sextile Pluto is going to be that intellectual breakthrough of like, oh, I see how these things actually, how they've actually worked together. I haven't given myself up yet. haven't given myself up completely in order to step into this transpersonal role. Maybe a little blindsided by it, but not giving myself up. And again, transforming ideas into action with courage, right? It takes courage to face a lot of this stuff without just like turning yourself into a victim. So let's see here. And right after that, I mean, this is like boom, 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 all of this Aries stuff right after this Aries new moon. So right after this is when Mars and Saturn come into a conjunction. Now that's the transit that I just mentioned where we might feel a little bit of how do I say that? Mars is very fast-paced in Aries, and Saturn is very restrictive. It's very disciplinary, of course. It's more so in Aries because it's like, I got to keep a lid on this, like otherwise very like bold and enterprising type of energy. And so, Saturn is going to be like, okay, putting up you got one foot on the gas and one foot on the brake, right? Type of thing. There are slowdowns, there's frustration. It can be very significant, right? And there can be pressure along with this Mars-Saturn conjunction. The Sabian symbol for 8 degrees Aries is this large woman's hat with streamers blown by the east wind, right? The east wind's coming and blowing the streamers. And it represents protection, spiritual guidance, and the development of consciousness. So again, kind of a slowing your roll, but it's constructive. So again, strategic, deliberate action instead of something that's rash and impulsive, right? And Mars and Aries can be all of those things. And so that rash and impulsive kind of initial action is unlikely to succeed. So go for it, but just know that like maybe that restriction is the protection from spirit. You hear what I'm saying? And it suggests a need for protection and conscious direction amidst strong, very sweeping influences, right? And so this is about balancing our active passion with a sense of wisdom. And that has been coming through a lot lately for me, at least. And along with that, the sun comes into Taurus, right? It comes out of Aries into Taurus, and things become much more substantiated, confirmed, right? With the sun coming into Taurus of what is. Now, right after that on 420, like we need an influence like this on 420, Mercury and Saturn come into that alignment as well. And so same degree, right? 8 degrees of Aries, the large hat, the streamers getting blown by the east wind. So Mercury and Saturn come into a conjunction right after this. And so a blend of intellectual focus and the structural discipline and the need to protect one's vulnerability during a period of high energy change, right? So we're already getting set up right away that there's going to be high energy change, like really high octane sweeping changes. And these conjunctions with Mercury and Mars, which are both personal planets, they both rule masculine signs of Aries and Gemini. They both also rule feminine signs of Scorpio and Virgo, but in this case, they're representing, especially Mars, the more masculine aspects. This is the Saturn energy is really what's going to, kind of put the brakes on and just being like, are all your ducks in a row? Is there a structure? Is there discipline around this? Are you taking responsibility? Because it's going to be really easy, I think. And believe me, there have been plenty of moments where I'm like, fuck it. I'm done, right? I am, throw it all to the wind and I'm out. You know what I mean? And that can mean a lot of different things, but the idea here is that the mind becomes exceptionally disciplined, strategic, and very serious. And there's nothing wrong with that. And again, if you think about it in terms of being spiritually protected, this is a good thing. So it may bring a need to take on more responsibility or face a reality check regarding a long-term goal or career path. Wow, I'm getting a big hit on that. Like big. And maybe that's personal to me. I know that it is, but I also feel like that I'm sure that is something that is It's for more than just me, right? That intuitive kind of like flush, right? The way that spirit talks to us is usually through our innate and our bodies. So work hard, be disciplined, but be mindful of blowing away your energy on too many uncoordinated pursuits. And it's really easy to do that when you're feeling frustrated, when you're feeling lost, when you're feeling despair. If you're just like, I need something to change or I'm going to kind of lose it. So use this time to build solid structures and not just act impulsively. So you have these two energies of Mars and Mercury and Aries coming to Saturn right after this new moon. And then the sun actually enters Taurus, which is the ground beneath our feet, right? And so this is really going to ground a lot of our energy, thankfully. And not in a way that's inert. It's really just like be structured, be disciplined, really take the time to embrace the protection that spirit might be offering. And then right after that, Mercury and Mars come into a conjunction at 9 degrees of Aries. And this is about being able to see the whole picture, the development of an inner realization of organic wholeness, right? When it's just this moment of the mind of the warrior, but even more than that, it's the mind of a warrior that is able to see the whole picture. So it's blending that intense, immediate action of Mars in Aries with profound intuitive insight and foresight, which, that gives you even more impetus, I think, to embrace the slowdown, the structure, the limitation, the responsibility of Saturn, right? So this transit is an invitation to blend that intellectual precision, like I talked about, Mercury and Aries, getting very linear and precise and pointed with warrior-like drive. So it's about the vision, strategic vision. So it's leading to new beginnings, profound personal empowerment, all these things that I think we all really kind of are craving right now. So let's see here. The 23rd is next week. So you're talking about the weekend just being like boom, boom, boom. And then we come into next week and things kind of, slow down a little bit. But then we have our first quarter moon, which is going to be actually in Leo, which is strangely enough the sign of the sun. And the moon, so it's kind of a mutual reception because the moon is actually exalted in Taurus, which is where the sun is, and then the sun is at home in Leo, and that's where the moon is. So there'll be a little bit less. It's not like the square itself will be any less annoying, as squares usually are just, very fraught, but it'll give a sense of like, oh, I can see it from that position, I can see it from that position, I can understand it, I can feel it. So that kind of helps a little bit. So what else is happening during that time is that Venus and Uranus come into that conjunction, right? This last degree of Taurus. This is a very powerful transit to also be happening at a first quarter moon with the moon in Leo like this, right? So it can be very disruptive to relationships and anything of value with Venus and Taurus, because Venus and Taurus, Venus in the second house, very possessive of what is quote unquote ours, right? So it can be very disruptive to relationships, finances, personal values, all of that out the window with Uranus, of course. Occurring at the final degree of Taurus, this alignment marks a critical culmination of a 7-year cycle with Uranus and Taurus, right? So what does that do? That takes us back to 2019. So this transit is especially powerful because it's also the last. So it's the end of that cycle for Uranus, that 7-year cycle of Uranus and Taurus, but it's also the last Venus-Uranus conjunction in Taurus for the entirety of the Uranus or Uranian transit, like the 84 years. So it's like a grand finale about long-term changes that have been happening since 2018 regarding what is valued, how income is generated, how we sustain ourselves, right? And I know that is something that is a focal point for many of the people that are in the Catalyst membership, the people I read for, and and just in the personal readings, and then just the membership in general when I do the readings, is that there is, for the most part, people have been working towards this really significant transition in all of these things, right? How income is generated, how we sustain ourselves, what does it mean to be self-sufficient or to sustain ourselves, or even just value in general. It really depends on where this is in your natal charts, in your progressions, maybe your draconic chart, at the soul level. So this is a big, big transit. It's going to be disruptive because of how, how rare this is. You're not going to see Venus and Uranus and Taurus again conjunct for another 84 years, the entirety of Uranus, because Uranus is not going to come back into Taurus. So, and this is also happening at the first quarter moon with the moon in Leo, right? And then right after that is when Venus comes into Gemini. So just keep in mind, whatever, this represents for you, it's really going to trigger something very disruptive, and maybe in a good way, right? Maybe something is just coming to fruition, like something is fully culminating here over years, over, a lineage, right? Whatever it is, it's going to come to a culmination point. And yes, it might be very disruptive, but it also is marking the dress rehearsal or a grand finale of sorts as we move into a completely different a different realm entirely. So let's see, that's the 23rd. Now like I said, there's a lot happening here. So the 25th is when the Sun and Pluto come into a square. And so this square is going to come up multiple times. Now, Venus already did it because Venus had already transited through Taurus. And so you're going to have Mercury, you're going to have Mars. At some level, you're going to have, later, Chiron's going to come into this position. They're all going to square Pluto at this degree. At this point, it's still direct, but it will be retrograde when other things come into that square. So what does this represent? The Sun squaring Pluto. 6 degrees Taurus, a bridge across a deep gorge. So this type of square represents a very transformative moment, right? Anything squaring Pluto is just, you're basically squaring off with the raw transformative power of, the death and rebirth cycle. What, going into your own shadow, the death of your own ego, basically. It's, there's a clash between the need for something secure, something tangible, right? The Sun in Taurus, and a radical, sometimes theatrical restructuring of social identity. Or if you're an Aquarius identified person, rising, sun, or moon, this is going to be about restructuring of your personal identity too. So it's a time of really intense pressure requiring you to build bridges while navigating deep and at times masked change, right? We don't always understand the fullness of why we're led down these pathways and guided into these situations and how we act on them, but but it is changing. So this is an opportunity to rebuild the bridge of your life. And I think this is really interesting because we have this bridge project on our property now since last year, that the Old Foot Bridge is beyond using. And so we've already built the bridge, but it's not finished, and it's going to get finished, and the old bridge is going to be demoed like this spring. And this imagery has come up so many times in reference to other things. And so I think it's interesting that this is going to be the consistent square over to Pluto is about this bridge. The old bridge was destroyed or became unsafe. And that is the truth. The old bridge here is definitely, I tell people, I'm like, don't even go over it. Like, you will have a foot through one of these boards if you try to come over this bridge. Now, of course, my husband, he continues to use it because I think he just likes to play with danger. But the new one requires you to play a different role and to be more authentic, right? The new bridge. Even if that feels risky, trust that as you build, the dark side or the deep chasm can be crossed, and your efforts to connect with others will be successful if you are willing to evolve, right? So this is the Sun square Pluto. And then Uranus comes into Gemini on the same day. right, on the 25th. So things are going to get really like, by next weekend, they're going to get really intense, as if they're not intense already. But that square is definitely very pronounced. Okay. So let's see what else is going on. Mercury is going to square Jupiter. Venus is going to trine Pluto. Oh, that's a good one to look at because it's a Gemini trine. That means that there's going to be lots of trines over to Pluto as well. So Venus in Gemini in a trine to Pluto ignites a very powerful period. Again, if we're transforming relationships through honest communication, deep intellectual connection, letting go of superficial validation to embrace authentic, intimate bonds, personal empowerment, right? So you can see it's not all just for us necessarily, that it's more about, all of this Aries energy to begin with at the beginning of this lunar cycle. Once we hit the first quarter moon and move forward, I feel like that's when things are going to start really presenting themselves as like, and that's kind of how it is with any lunar cycle, right? The first week or so is, things are just starting to surface that we're like, oh, that could be a problem, or, oh, that seems like it might be an obstacle. We're very reactionary. Once you get to the first quarter moon, and it's very much on the surface about like, what is the essence of the friction here? What is the crisis? From there, it's going to be like, okay, I feel what the crisis is, so let's let's be proactive. Let's be responsive rather than reactionary. But there's going to be like, some about faces, especially Uranus coming into Gemini. I just don't think we're going to get away with that without that being something that really stands out for all of us, right? So the last piece I want to bring up, and I mean, we can look at, the way that this comes, unfolds, I guess you should say, as we go along, is I mean, look at this, right? This grand square with the nodes. Actually, this dovetails perfectly into what I was going to end with. This grand square with the nodes of the moon, Black Moon Lilith, and Venus. So this is something that's coming up right before the full moon, right? So the moon will be in Libra. It'll come into opposition with Chiron, right? And then there will be this grand square. And grand squares are always, they're always things that we are trapped in and can't get. The only way out is through. You know what I mean? There's no way to escape a grand square. They're very frustrating. They are aggravating, to say the least, and a lot of times we can feel like we're spinning out, and that's exactly the way to do it. You spin that thing until you spin yourself right out of it. The only way out is through it. And so that's, and you're talking about the nodes of the moon, you're talking about Black Moon Lilith, you're talking about stuff that is deep, and the only thing that isn't in this whole grand square is Venus in Gemini, right? And so this, the value of communication, the value of logic, of rationality, of the capacity to, work with different ideas, to debate back and forth, to be objective, to be conscious. That's really the only thing in this grand square that is actually above the surface. Lilith and the nodes of the moon are deep. They're soul-oriented. They are primal in the case of Black Moon Lilith. And I suspect here, 7 to 8 degrees Gemini is like, actually, let me look. I think I have this written out. Yeah, T square the nose. 8 degrees Gemini is aroused strikers surround a factory. Ooh, boy. Okay. So you can bet that people are, part of that is that the energy is going to start really amping up around discrepancy, and especially, what's fair, what's not fair, the haves, the have-nots, right? This constant back and forth of Gemini. Oh boy. And this is going to mark the, the energy going right into the full moon, which, by the way, Mercury and Chiron will be conjunct at that point too. So I'm going to end it here. What I'd like to add before I do that is where the true nodes are. And this is actually going to, unless something changes, and it always can, this is what I think is what I'd like to be the focus of this week's Catalyst membership energy reading, is looking at the shift of the nodes, specifically because the south node is now in conjunction with Alpha Draconis. And I think that this Draco energy with the south node of the moon, the fact that the nodes of the moon itself are conceptualized as the head and tail of a dragon. You have the Alpha Draconis energy in the Draco constellation itself. There's something really strong here that I want to investigate, and I'm being guided to investigate more intuitively. So I feel like that I plan to focus on this in the next energy reading. So if you're interested in that and you're interested in getting readings every month, 2 readings every month to go along with these forecasts, plus a discount code for everything that I offer. And if you want to do premium membership, you get your own personal reading every month as well in relation to your chart. And we pull the cards, and it's a really great check-in every month, and it keeps you consistent, gives you an opportunity to check in about stuff. If you're interested in that, that's all in the description box below, and you can sign up. And the membership site goes right through my website as well. But that's something that really, and the fact that this grand square is involved with the nodes of the moon, and that's the axis of Draco. So if you had 7 degrees Virgo Pisces in your charts, like you are a Draco star seed, right? Which, is not always the thing anybody wants to hear. But at the same time, I'll tell you what, those of us who are Draco star seeds, these are some of the most like badass, powerful people that are, at least on my client list, right? These are people who are able to utilize that dragon or serpent energy very masterfully, right? It just depends on how you use it and to what end that really determines if you are quote unquote evil or not, right? I mean, you get stuck in these like absolutes or fundamentalism about these images. This is where you basically have joined a cult, regardless of what you think about it. Anyway, I digress. The point I'm trying to make here is that I'm going to be addressing this in the next Catalyst membership reading. So if you're interested in that, you can find everything you need in the description box below. So friends, I'm going to leave it here for today. I hope that you got what you needed from this forecast. If you have any questions, you feel free to drop a comment. My email is also in the description box if you have a more personal question or you're looking for clarification on anything, or if you're interested in a reading or energy work. You can go to my website and shop around and see if anything really speaks to you. I hope everybody is doing well, taking care of yourself and the people around you the best that you can. Remember that this new moon is about total spiritual independence, not that kind of narcissistic, like nobody else matters except me, but truly following your soul path. And sometimes that is going to disappoint people who have expectations of you that are not about that soul path. And we've had to go through our own trauma and wounding about that already, all of us, in some way, shape, or form. And that's where CHIRON comes into the picture. We can either reinforce that victim narrative for ourselves, or we can allow our wounds to be highlighted by the sun and really set some intentions to really embrace that total spiritual independence, because that's what we're here for, is to reach that level of spiritual maturity and full union with spirit while we're in a material form, right? It seems like a tall order, but that's what we're here to do. All right, friends, I hope everyone is doing well. I look forward to your comments. Please like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell if you like to know when I upload things. I really appreciate it. I appreciate all of you so very much, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye.